very sensitive.
So Felix and Oliver invited me out to share my personal experience of being an entrepreneur, to help out other entrepreneurs. Something I haven't thought about much. Usually I'm just focused on going forward. So it was a nice opportunity to step back and reflect a little bit about the experience. So what's my story? My brother and I started Khimetrics. It was a venture-backed startup. We're credited with creating the retail price optimization industry. We have roughly 20 patents on the technologies we developed then. Managing over $100 billion in revenue, working with a number of tier 1 retailers. Inc. magazine has us as the fastest growing company a couple years in a row. Fortune has us as one of their 25 breakout innovative companies. And then we were acquired by SAP in 2006. So my brother and I, our history has been in pricing, and that's where we're at today. And we've been having fun disrupting the retail pricing. We started as little kids in pricing. Our parents started a price collection company in Canada when we were 6 and 7. So it was a small family business, and being a small family business meant as kids, we were involved in the business. And 6, 7 years old, we were in the stores writing down prices. And they would collect those prices and then sell them to retailers, manufacturers, and wholesalers so they could know where they were in the market. So that experience was very valuable, being a kid, hearing the conversations around the table about business. My dad even brought me to business meetings. And I think that's really valuable for kids to get that insight. And I try to encourage our employees, and I bring my kids in when I can to get an experience of what it's like to be in the work environment. After starting that business, my dad wanted me to take over the company, but that wasn't interesting to me. I wanted to pursue physics, engineering, and it wasn't until I was finishing my PhD that I realized that my dad really had kind of an interesting business and was collecting interesting data, and that I could apply a lot of the mathematical modeling that I was doing to pricing. And that was the impetus to start Khimetrics, and my brother and I teamed up, and we ended up starting that company. And after we sold it to SAP, I stayed on a couple of years as a chief scientist, and that was a really neat opportunity too, because now I had an opportunity to meet retailers and manufacturers all over the world, and we're exploring how do we make a more efficient supply chain from retail all the way, from the manufacturer all the way to the end consumer. After a couple of years being in a big company, I started to get frustrated reselling my business plan over and over again, and decided it was time to get back in the startup environment. So we started Engage 3, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing at the end. So, as I was thinking about, advice for an entrepreneur, the first question is, well, what is an entrepreneur? And, whoops. Then, a harder question is, what's your role as an entrepreneur? What's your job description? And I almost become envious sometimes of people that have clear jobs, roles, and responsibilities. So, an entrepreneur is one of the only positions where you don't have a clear role, budget, job response milestones, plans. It's always funny to listen to people describe their founders. They always describe them as kind of crazy, a little bit crazy. They would come in changing things, and you wonder, whether this change is good or bad. This didn't come out very well. There was it was actually on the Wikipedia. There's all these descriptions of entrepreneur, and it just shows that there's so many different ways that people look at it. But one I thought was really interesting was this definition by Howard Stevenson, which was that it's a pursuit of an opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. How many people think about planning resources that they don't own? Somebody else owns. And that's really why people think entrepreneurs is kind of crazy. Because they're going outside the box, thinking outside of those boundaries. But it's the role of the entrepreneur is to see that opportunity, to provide that structure for the organization to move towards that. And it's always fuzzy. And as you're moving towards it, you start to see obstacles that you didn't anticipate, and you have to react to that. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, and that's the roller coaster. But when they're bad, one thing people don't talk about is it's really scary. And you end up with things that come up, and it's you got a competitor that pops up that all of a sudden it looks like they're doing things bigger and better and faster, or you have your technology. There's a problem with the technology you didn't anticipate. Big company comes into the market. You're running out of money. You can't get financing, and those things are scary, and they keep you up at night. And it feels like, as soon as everybody knows, all your employees are going to fold, and you're not going to get investments, and that's the fear, and that's part of the roller coaster. But what I've found is when those things come up, that you have to embrace it, and those are oftentimes those defining moments that define you and the company. And usually there's two outcomes. Either you dig in deep and you understand that there wasn't really a threat, and that there's a core value that you have that you didn't appreciate, and then you come up with a new appreciation of that. Or there is a real problem, and you need to pivot and adapt. But one thing you can't do is you can't bury your head in the sand. You need to face it, and you need to face it quick. So I thought I'd share a couple of those experiences with you and how we reacted to those events. So the first one is we started Khimetrics I was right out of graduate school. My brother had no experience. So how do you build a product for Fortune 500 companies when you have no money, no connections, and no experience? And this is how these problems come up. Oftentimes they seem impossible. So fortunately we were very young and naive, so we didn't know there were big problems. So the way we approached it is, welcome to the garage. So first thing to do is just cut costs to the core. So we moved in together. We used the garage for an office. You can see my brother's bed here and his clothes. So he lived there. We sold our cars. My wife was riding her bike with a trailer to get groceries. So cutting costs was one. The other was we hired people that I call work investors. They invested their work for shares in the company instead of cash. And that's something I still do today. It's so valuable. What it does is it helps find people that really believe and are passionate, and it filters out people that are just looking for a paycheck. And even today, most of our employees work for half cash, half equity. And that's a great filtering process. And the third thing is, on the networking, is just asking for help. And it has always surprised me how much when people see how dedicated, passionate, and you're making sacrifices, that they want to help you. And we've been helped so much by that. And oftentimes it's just asking. The other one came up, how do you raise money when investors that believe new business models will make your business irrelevant? So how that showed up for us is we were starting a price optimization company focused on large retailers. And this was in the 90s when the dot-com boom was roaring. So we didn't pay much attention to the dot-com boom. We knew where the value was with the brick and mortar retailers. That's where over 99% of the revenues was. And that's where our solution provided value, is proportional to the revenue. But when we started talking to VC at that time, all of them were investing in .coms. And so it was hard to get a meeting, not having connections, and then not having a .com pitch. So we finally got a meeting with the venture capitalists. We're at a point where we only had a couple months runway, so we needed money really bad. But we're really proud of the results we had. We had results where we were showing that we could produce for a regional retailer $10 million a year incremental profit, which is huge. So we were really encouraged by that, going into the meeting really confident. Halfway through the meeting, the VC asked me, he says, well, what about buy.com? He says, they sell their products at cost, they make their money on advertising. He says, that's it. No more pricing. Sell at cost, game over. That was the end of the meeting. It just ended right there. It's like, I went away so disappointed. And it felt like there was no chance of VC investment with that. They were all looking at these .coms, all these different models, and they didn't want to put a bet on an old business model. So we left that, and that was a point where we reflected on that, and it was very disturbing. But we decided, okay, we need to pivot. And at that point, what we ended up doing is approaching buy.com, and we realized, if they're doing that, they're losing a lot of money by pricing everything at cost. They could be a lot smarter by pricing some items above cost and other items below cost, being smarter about the mix of pricing, and drive more profit or revenues. So we approached them. They were very bright guys. They got it, and they ended up being our first customer. So we went from this business model that was terrifying and was going to destroy us to our first customer. So how do you sell a product that nobody wants and is priced 10 times more than the product they do want? So we're starting in the price optimization. This is my first lesson in a technology-driven company. So we saw an opportunity there, but retailers typically are promoted from bag boy up onto CEO. They're very analytical. And we're trying to sell this very sophisticated mathematical optimization to them. And they kind of heard the dial tone. And what they were looking for was a rule-based system to automate their pricing at the time. That would cost about $100,000, $20,000 a year for support. And we're targeting $1 million plus and a couple $100,000 a year for support. So that's a non-starter, right? So what we did is we started doing tests. We said, let's prove the value. So we set up these man versus machine tests. Control focus. So a set of stores that they would price, another set of stores that we would price. And through that, we proved the value, and consistently we'd show 1% of sales converted to profit. And that's huge for a grocery retailer that's operating on a 1% profit margin. We're talking about doubling net profits. We had the CEO of Albertsons mention us 3 times on his earnings calls publicly for helping them manage profitability and the price image. So that was the first part. That wasn't enough though. So I thought it was a home run, right? You're able to produce tens, hundreds of millions of dollars for a company. The CEO's gonna drive it through. No, that wasn't enough. They still didn't understand. It was a black box, and because the organization didn't understand it, there was no way it was gonna be implemented. So then what we had to do is we had to take it out of the black box. It wasn't until we developed the user interface where they could understand how it was working and they could interact with it, that our sales started taking off. So the 2 points there were, really focus on the value proposition and measuring that, and then integrating it where they could really work with it. That is sensitive. So I wanted to share with you a little bit of what we're doing now. So after arming the retailers and helping them be smarter with their pricing, what we realized is that shoppers need more help. Pricing is becoming very dynamic. Amazon's starting to price intraday. Walmart's starting to follow that, and it won't be long for other retailers have to follow that too. So as pricing becomes very dynamic, it breaks all the shoppers' heuristic rules that they're using now. So they need better tools to defend themselves. So what we're doing now is we started Engage 3, and we have a consumer application, Shopping Scout, to help shoppers manage their shopping. And our mission is to empower families to live better and help them navigate the hundreds of thousands of purchasing decisions, the options that they have to evaluate every year when they buy products. And we want to help them save time, money,